Good morning. I am Alyssa Silverman, at-large council member and chair of the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. Today is Wednesday, December 9th, and the time is now 9:30. My apologies to everyone. I had computer issues this morning, first time in the pandemic, and lost a significant amount of work, but we will continue on. So I am convening this oversight roundtable regarding unemployment insurance programs in the district during the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the things I lost this morning is some of the responses that I try to do every morning to workers in our city who write to me because they do not receive their unemployment benefits or having to understand the issues regarding their benefit and why they're not getting paid. I will tell you that nearly every morning for the last 9 months, there have been multiple messages in my inbox from DC workers asking me to help them with their unemployment benefits. As we all know, the coronavirus pandemic is not simply a public health emergency, but it's an economic crisis for our city that's been uneven, honestly. Our businesses and their workers, particularly in the restaurant, hotel, convention, and retail industries, have simply been clobbered by the pandemic. This has caused massive layoffs in these industries, and nearly 160,000 workers in our city have filed for unemployment claims to get the financial assistance to just keep them afloat and keep their families afloat right now. Now, this is a scale, 160,000 workers in less than a year is a scale no one anticipated, but we need as a city to meet the challenge. The unemployment system is supposed to be the safety net that is there for workers who lose a job through no fault of their own, and that is certainly the situation we are in right now. But far too many workers are falling through the cracks and are not getting their benefits. And this is because unemployment is a federal system that is administered through the states. It's complicated, but we have talked about this at other oversight hearings, but we need to make the program understandable for our claimants so that they know what to do, so that they can access this critical lifeline or these critical lifelines, because we've created an additional program for non-traditional workers who traditionally don't receive unemployment, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I have to say that I know that our workers in our Department of Employment Services are working very hard, but we need to make these programs understandable, particularly now that people are in long-term unemployment. I'm still hearing from workers who've been on the phone for hours, who've called 20 times, and they still don't have their benefit and they still don't know what's going on. So even though we have been in this pandemic 9 months, we're all exhausted. We need to help these workers because it not only helps them and their children and their families, but it helps our city. This is part of the solution to get our economy back up and running. So today we're going to hear from, I believe, 10 witnesses about some of the problems that are still plaguing our UI claimants. And I will say a focus today, I think, is going to be on extensions. Many of our workers are now in long-term unemployment, which means if you're in the traditional UI program, you're a W-2 worker, or we're a W-2 worker, you have exhausted your initial 26 weeks of benefits. And if you are in the new program created for those who previously were ineligible for unemployment, I'm talking about our gig workers, our independent contractors, and you receive pandemic unemployment assistance, you might be hitting or nearing the 39 weeks of benefits. You qualify for the extension programs, but they are confusing. And so I just want to take a moment to explain them. So if you are a traditional unemployment claimant, you receive UI and you've exhausted your 26 weeks, you are eligible for an extension called Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC. You need to apply for it. And many of our claimants have run into issues. One of the biggest issues that I have heard from our claimants time and again, and I have a bunch of emails in my Outlook inbox right now, are workers who in our city who work in multiple states. So you're a bartender who works one job in DC and one job in Silver Spring, Maryland. So you have wages in both states. Many of our claimants who have wages in more than one state have run into issues with PEUC. And we're going to talk about this more in the public witness part of our hearing, but basically it is confusing because when you exhaust your claim in DC and you have wages in another state, you have to determine whether you're eligible for unemployment in that other state. As I said, we're going to talk about this more, but it is extremely confusing and we need to give better guidance to our claimants. And that's something I'm going to work on and I'm going to talk to the Department of Employment Services about. But let's continue with the extensions for a moment. So PEUC, which is a federally funded program created out of the pandemic and the CARES Act, is 13 weeks. So what happens if you run out of your 13 weeks of PEUC? Well, then you're eligible for another extension program, which is called extended benefits. That makes sense, right? This was initially a 13-week program, and you might have read or heard from our last hearing that the council, working in coordination with DOES and the Department of Labor, has turned on a second part of that program, which adds another 7 weeks when we are in periods of high unemployment, which we certainly are now, and a period in which the federal government would pay for those benefits, which we are in now. And that's the other thing I want to talk about and pause on for a second. You've heard this, I'm sure, from many people across the country. We need Congress to stop dithering, and we need Congress to help our workers in the district and across this country by passing a new bill to address unemployment. You might have read in the paper, I think it's in the paper today, there's a proposal to renew the $600 supplemental benefit with unemployment. We cannot do this alone on the city and state level. We need federal money and we need it now. We need another stimulus package. But until either Congress or I'm very hopeful about the incoming Biden administration's economic plans, but until then, we're going to need to rely on ourselves. And that's tough because we can't deficit spend like the federal government. We have to balance our budget. But I was very happy to hear on Monday when Mayor Bowser announced the district's own, she called it a stimulus, but it's a supplemental payment to some of our DC unemployed workers who live in the district. So for those workers who are claimants and receive pandemic unemployment assistance, so you are the contractors, gig workers, newly hired workers who receive PUA and you live in the district and you have been eligible for PUA as of the end of November, DC is going to give you a one-time stimulus payment of $1,200. And I know that, and this is a life preserver, I know for many of you who have only received the initial $179 a week and have not had either a monetary redetermination of your wage replacement or back pay. Now, those who watch our hearings know that PUA and the many claims that have not received the monetary redetermination and back pay was a major focus, both of our public witnesses as well as of committee questioning during the hearing. I know that DOES Director Unique Morris Hughes was thinking a lot about PUA, and I'm glad that the administration has decided to address this. It is part of the solution. It's not the full solution. Obviously, we need help again from our federal partners, because the other issue that is looming is that the CARES Act money, so this was the stimulus package that was passed by Congress, I think back in maybe late March or early April, the money for those programs that were created like PUA is ending at the end of December. So if Congress does not take action, then we are going to see PUA and some of the federally funded extension programs like PUC go away. And that would be devastating, not only for workers in our city, but across the country. So I hope that does not happen. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about today. So we are going to hear from 10 witnesses, and then I had hoped that the committee would hear directly today from the Director of the Department of Employment Services, Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, who last appeared before the committee in September. I talked to Director Morris Hughes, and because of the stimulus announcement, obviously it's a very busy week at DOES to get this ready. So we are working with the director, and I am very hopeful that we are going to find a time next week for the director to appear before the committee to talk about first the stimulus, how it's going to work, who is eligible, and talk a bit more about the timing of those dollars. So that's a very good thing, and that the agency will talk about. Second, about extended benefits. A lot of claimants, including many people who've emailed me and called our office, have asked, when are we turning on that extra 7 weeks? I am hopeful that Director Morris Hughes will have a updated timeline for us on that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about the extensions and issues with PEUC and extended benefits. So I look forward to having that discussion with her, as well as, and I hope this isn't where we're headed, but if the federal programs run out, what does that mean for our workers? But I do want to focus on another piece of progress before we begin with our public witnesses, and that is the modernization of the unemployment insurance claimant portal. As many of you know, we have an outdated system that we have funded to make more user-friendly and modernize. It is certainly in need of an overhaul. DOES has had funding to develop a new portal, and now the work is getting started. Last month, the agency called for bids to actually build this new portal, and the legislation passed by the council this year in the budget requires that the new portal be launched by September 30th, 2022. So I think that's been a lot from me. I want to say a few more things before we begin, which is that if you are watching either in right now or you're watching a rebroadcast of this hearing, you can submit testimony to the committee in writing. You can do that by emailing labor@dccouncil.us before Wednesday, December 23rd at 5 p.m. So get your Christmas shopping done, submit your testimony, you'll be all set for Christmas. Or you can call and leave a voicemail telling us what you want to be included in the hearing record, and we will transcribe it. So that number to call is 202-455-0153. Let me give that one more time. It's 202-455-0153. And remember to speak slowly and please spell your name for us so that we will have it correct in the hearing record. I do not see any other members from the committee have joined us, so we are going to move to our public witnesses. Our first panel is going to consist of Caitlin Schiavone, Zachary Hoffman, who is Executive Vice President, DC Bar and Restaurant Workers Alliance, Andrew Shapiro, who is Owner President of KMB Sodas, and Monica Stempo, who I believe has already joined us. So I will give a moment for our public witnesses to assemble. And Ms. Stempo, if you want to turn your camera on for us. Terrific. Well, do we have Ms. Schiavone here? Okay. Is Jamal Washington here? Okay. Ashley Young. Ms. Young, I see you've joined us. You'll be the fourth member of our panel. So why don't we begin this morning with Mr. Hoffman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ms. Young and Ms. Stempa, I'm just going to ask you guys to turn your speakers off. Thank you so much. Mr. Hoffman, you'll kick us off. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, council members and committee staff, for allowing me to speak with you today. My name is Zachary Hoffman, and this morning I'm speaking on behalf of the DC Bar and Restaurant Workers Alliance. We are an inclusive, worker-driven platform providing protection, empowerment, advocacy, and tangible services to the bar and restaurant workforce. I serve as the Executive Vice President for this organization, and my testimony today will reflect the opinions of my organization and its members. I want to first thank Councilmember Silverman for holding this roundtable discussion. It is my hope that our dialogue today will help spur much-needed changes and increase accessibility to the UI programs active in DC during this pandemic. There's been significant difficulty amongst the bar and restaurant workforce in accessing critical benefits, including UI, PEUC, PUA, and EB. This is now the third time I'm publicly bringing these concerns to the committee, with little to no changes felt by one of the hardest hit communities in the district. For months, workers have faced obstacle after obstacle when trying to access UI. Traditional unemployment claimants are still today waiting on back payments. PEUC has proven to be a minefield of red tape and holdups, and there's little faith that EB will be without these same issues. DCBRWA has been inundated with requests for help figuring out how to get benefits to those who are attempting to file claims. There's been little to no outreach from DOES, and workers are still facing long hold times, unanswered emails when trying to fix their claims. Workers have been asking for help outside of DOES through the Office of Nightlife and Culture, including others, and still have difficulties getting their claims adjusted properly that you council members say you're aware of and getting copied on the emails. Throughout the unemployment crisis, we've heard from several organizations and individuals in these hearings about common sense approaches to help improve UI and the accessibility of these benefits. However, it appears that DOES has not been willing or able to make these necessary changes. This committee must be more proactive in overseeing the administration of UI programs because the workers are asking for help and they need it. Attached to my testimony today, and I have sent this to your staff, council member, are 2 correspondence letters from the Department of Labor that I believe underscore not only the need to get claims benefits paid, but the legal requirement DOES is held to. Many workers are going weeks without benefits, being told to wait until their claims are processed. There exists a limit on how long an individual can wait for their benefits, not to mention the legal protections that exist to ensure timely delivery of those payments. You'll see I have a section here referencing one of those letters. In Section 303A1 of the Social Security Act requires states as a condition of receiving federal UC administration grants to provide in their laws for such methods of administration are found in the Secretary of Labor to be reasonable, calculated to ensure full payments of unemployment compensation when due. In the 1971 decision, California Department of Human Resources Development versus JABA, the Supreme Court interpreted when due in Section 303A1 of the Social Security Act to mean at the earliest stage of an unemployment that such payments are administratively feasible after giving both the worker and employer an opportunity to be heard. The delays and massive backlog of claims are not only hindering workers' ability to survive during a pandemic, but the case can also be made that a failure to uphold legally mandated requirements from the Department of Labor are in breach. I am asking this committee to do everything in its power to support DOES and enable its ability to get claims processed and increase communication with claimants. The top priority must be the support of bar and restaurant workers who are dependent on the critical services and deserving of a fair and timely response to their claims. Thank you, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Shapiro. Welcome again to the council.
Good morning. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Councilmember Silverman. I'm not in a great place for a video, so I hope that's okay. But I do want to thank you all for holding another roundtable to discuss the challenges faced by many. I think Mr. Hoffman echoed a lot of the frustration that I've also been hearing from the workforce I'm a part of, which is the hospitality, bar, and restaurant industry. Personally, for me, my experiences on unemployment have not been frustrating at all. I have pretty seamlessly transitioned to the different programs, but I do follow, what a lot of other workers are experiencing, and on a daily basis, find myself answering questions. And again, I want to talk just a little bit about where I think, there could be some improvements in the communication, particularly as it relates to how people are getting information, what sorts of information they're getting, et cetera. So I know this has been brought up before, but I know there was an effort made to reduce waste and paper, and I assume expenses by not sending out the paper copies of the tax return. I think as we get to this time of the year, it's vitally important. I opted back in to receive those, and I've not received those. There's a lot of critical information on that, and I think people really need to have access to know where they're at with weeks, where they're at with benefits, and particularly as we get close to the end of the year and people have to start thinking about taxes, because people will have to file taxes on this, and I assume a lot of people probably haven't opted to have taxes removed and things like that. So I don't know what sort of effort is being made to get that information out, but I would certainly hope that has not been lost in the discussion of everything else, because those weekly forms were really critical, again, for so many people to just get basic information about their account, what money they had eligible and where they were on the weeks. So I wanted to bring that back to the committee's attention so that that was not lost in the scuffle of everything. I actually did find an incredibly useful newsletter that I don't think is weekly, but I have received a couple of times from the DOES, which has lots of information. I really had to go out of my way to find it on their website. But the 2 times that I received it, it had a ton of useful information. I know, through my campaign work in the DC Council race, I was really lucky to get to spend a lot of time getting to know a lot of the government websites and discovering how many useful newsletters and resources and things there are. And one of the things that's been most troubling to me is it's you really have to dig to find that information. And DC has a lot of really helpful programs, particularly at this moment for workers of all varieties. And I think, another thing that I would really like to stress is, the digital communication as far as like email newsletters and things like that. You're emphasizing people getting access to those because there is a lot of information in those. And I think a lot of the questions that people are emailing and they're waiting on hold for can be answered in that stuff. So I wanted to stress again, just the need to make sure that that information is getting out to people and that we have access, people know that they have access to these, really useful, comprehensive overviews of the policies and the programs. And the third thing that I wanted to address, I really appreciate the administration finding money in the CARES Act that we were allotted to help the PUAC workers. I know a lot of contract workers that have really been struggling and they don't get talked about a lot because, they kind of fit in the margins. What I wanted to know was there any talk, I guess, okay.
You have another minute. Nope, you have another minute. Mr.
So much of everything is based on federal guidance and allowance. Has there been any discussion of creating some local programs beyond this, given the unique challenges faced by our city and, the overwhelming amount of hospitality workers and 1099 workers to bear in mind? I would hope that one of the things that this has brought to attention is how many kind of non-traditional workers there are and how little help there was for them in so many avenues. So again, thank you for your time. I hope that, the communication things are continued to be discussed and they do not get lost in the shuffle of everything. And we continue to work to make sure people have, access to what they need to know about the programs and their filings.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Ms. Stumpo. Well, hi, how are you? Welcome to the council.
No, there. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You can begin your testimony.
Okay. So I was a bartender at El Techo in DC, but so when the pandemic closed I'm just going to kind of relate my own personal experience with the whole unemployment system, just kind of how it's been since the beginning.
I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. We have a clock. We're going to start it now.
I hopefully it won't take about 5 minutes, but let's see how I can do this. Okay, so when the order came out for the restaurants to close, obviously I lost my position, was misinformed where to file, so I filed in Virginia where I lived. Then within a week received information from Virginia that that's not where to file, so then I filed within DC. And then I waited until the end of May, so about 2.5 months, with constantly going on to different sort of webinars and sending email addresses to any email that is on DOE's website, any phone number, just daily calls, daily hours to get anything moving. Sometime in May, there was, and it was basically like that I was approved, but I wasn't approved for any money. So then they had to approve the money and it kept dragging out. So then when it did happen, when in May, they finally did, like last week of May, it was approved. The back pay, which I was supposed to receive till at least when I filed in DC, I only received for the weeks of May. Interestingly enough, this morning, DOES called me as I was scheduled to testify here with some weeks of my back pay from April that they're like, oh, we hear you need back pay, so here, we're going to give it to you now. So, I mean, that's like, I'm very happy that I'm going to get money that was due to me 5 months ago. But, I do think that the fact that I was testifying today was the driving reason behind that. And that's definitely not the situation for most of the people within my industry or in general who are unemployed at the moment. And then other than that, once it went through, it was pretty seamless with my claims and going on forward. When unemployment ran out, I had been, I guess there was a little bit of an issue with my transition to the PEUC again, because the information wasn't clear that I still had to actually be claiming unemployment the same way. I filed it and was expecting someone to be like, you have been approved, or some sort of information about what my next steps were supposed to be. So then once I reached out again to every single email on DOES, someone came back to me saying that I need to file for these weeks ASAP, and things moved into the PEOC part of the unemployment compensation. However, it is significantly less than even my unemployment is normally. So, you know, that was kind of a bummer that I was going to be making or getting less than I was getting on unemployment already without the additional federal funding, which, you know, is kind of hard to live on $200 a week. So that's kind of where I'm now in my personal struggle. And I've tried to help as many people who I could have helped try to navigate the system, because once I got through, so many people, like I can't, you know, so many people I work with were having trouble navigating the system with even just getting through on phone calls, or then writing emails to people so that someone can take up their case. So I spent some time trying to help other people communicate with DOES, even if it was just because of their language level skills, like they couldn't write in English to that what their situation was or what they needed, or even in any other language. So that's just kind of, you know, the process of how to get the claims is confusing for people who even, you know, navigate within an electronically, technologically forward world. It's very difficult to actually understand what the steps and process are. So I think just in some way of streamlining the process, and anyone who's worked within agents, or, you know, any sort of industry that got shut down on March 15th, there really shouldn't have been any reason. It was a complicated process to prove that you lost your work. It was obviously that you lost your work. Everything was shut down. So kind of just making the whole process simple so that we as workers understand what to do and do it as quickly as possible. But, you know, that being said, any communication I actually got.
We have just lost your audio, Ms. Stempo. If you want to turn your audio back on.
Once they were coming through. Sorry, and things at once.
That's okay. Well, the timing is such that is 5 minutes. I am going to have some questions for you because I think you're one of our prototypical examples. So thank you for your testimony, and I will have some questions. Ms. Young, welcome to the council. And if I see you've turned your audio on and your video on. Good morning. Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Well, listening to everyone's testimonies, I don't know if I really fit in, but I have been going through some trials and tribulations with DOES unemployment before and after the pandemic hit. They're just taking me through a lot of loops and holes, to get money back pay that is due to me. They have had me file appeals. I've won appeals. I've had, my final order stating that, I could receive my benefits, and it still has been nothing. And I've been emailing everyone that I can email. I've even reached out to my council member of Ward 8. Emails have not been responded. It was one person that was responding back to me on a consistent basis, but she has now stopped responding. I had reached out to a lady named Miss Jackson, and was emailing her consistently back to back. And it wasn't until last week where she just finally responded back to me at 9 o'clock at night. I've called in several times where I'm on hold for maybe 4 hours, 4.5 hours, just to get through to speak to someone in regards to my claim, because I keep going from eligible to ineligible, back to eligible. Now I'm back to ineligible. So I don't know what is going on the back end with my situation, but it's just frustrating because people took the pandemic lightly. They People felt like they don't have bills to pay because of the pandemic, but you still have to pay your bills. And I was solely relying on receiving unemployment, and I was disqualified for it. So just I don't know which way to go with it. I did speak to Miss Jackson last week. She asked me to give her 24 to 48 hours, which would have put her at Thursday, to respond back to me via phone or via email. And it is now Wednesday, and I haven't heard anything. I've called her supervisor and I've called her, and I have not gotten a response from anyone. And at this point, I even reached out to higher people and haven't received anything back as a response. And I even took it to where as though I went on the actual website and filled out the form for the the director, and told her about the situation, and still nothing.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ms. Young, for your testimony, and I will have some questions for you as well. Let me start. So we're going to do a 10-minute round of questions. So let me start with you, Mr. Hoffman. So you represent restaurant and hospitality workers. So give me the 3 biggest issues you are seeing from workers you represent right now.
I think initially the major issue were delays in traditional unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Following that, now when PEUC is having some sort of multi-state work history. I spoke with the director of Nightlife and Culture yesterday, actually, at an event, and said that was, in his opinion, the most common issue that's running into people being denied claims. I understand that there is some sort of, Virginia is not apparently responding to DOES, and that's complicating issues. And I understand that that's, an interstate matter. But at the same time, that should not be something that is keeping people from the necessary benefits that they're getting.
Okay, let me stop you there. So we are hearing this a lot. We've certainly received a lot of these claims. And I believe another one of our witnesses, Ms. Hagner from the Legal Aid Society, we're going to talk more about this issue. But if I'm understanding you correctly, the issue is that a lot of our hospitality workers work in multiple states. So you have a job in the district, let's say you're a bartender in the district, and you also tend bar in Silver Spring. I think I gave that example in my opening comments. So and what happens is, let's say a majority of your wages are in the district, and so you apply for unemployment in the district. When your 26 weeks are exhausted, you apply for PEUC, and then you are told that you have out-of-state wages and you need to apply in Maryland. Is that what your workers are hearing?
That's essentially what's happening, but it is also important to remember that most of those cases I worked in Virginia 6 years ago, and it's coming up and flagging my account. Or it's not that I worked there last year, it's that, years ago, yes, I did work in Virginia, and that's holding up my account. So that's important as well. It's not necessarily a concurrent multi-state employment situation. It's a previous work history.
You have a previous work history in another state, but it's not in, and I'm going to use the technical term here, the base year that determines your unemployment claim. Okay. So for the workers who did work in multiple states in their base year, do you feel that the agency gives enough guidance and instructions to workers on what to do when they are told that they have a multi-state claim and they need to pursue unemployment in the other state they worked in?
No.
Oh, yes, Ms. Young, you are welcome to turn your camera on and join in the discussion. Thank you for being assertive. So you don't think there's okay.
No, there's not enough guidance with it. I'm dealing with that now. Being as it's an issue on my claim. They had sent me an eligibility monetary determination, and it was because they just told me to write a letter. Write a statement, send it to Sachs Finding, and just say that you want to combine your wages. So I follow their directions, and I did it. And it's like, now that I've said that I want to combine my out-of-state wages, which are Virginia wages, and it decreased my amount that I would receive. And it also said that I made too much within a quarter of a year. It showed that I made just under 15,000. So that's now an issue on my claim now, and they just emailed me last night another monetary determination, and it's held me ineligible because of me trying to combine my Virginia wages. And when I did call to speak to someone, they actually said that they reached out to Virginia, and Virginia has yet to get back to them about it. I tried reaching out to Virginia myself to call just to see if it would be better for me to just file in Virginia and then come back to DC. And it's like, when you try to call, you get the automated person on the phone, and soon as it goes to the parcel where though you're trying to speak to a live person, it'll tell you that there's no one available, and the line hangs up. So
let me pause you there for a second, Ms. Young. We're going to use you as a case study and answer whatever you're willing to answer. I'm going to ask some basic questions. So do you work in the hospitality industry?
Okay.
What was your job?
Yeah. I was a concierge.
You were a concierge at a hotel or at a hotel?
No, at an apartment building.
At an apartment building. Okay. And you did this work in multiple places? So you had different jobs?
No. So I actually did the work in DC. It wasn't until I tried to file for my claim in DC that my Virginia wages came up. And that's what's holding up my claim.
So did you work in Virginia in 2019?
Yes.
In a different job?
Yes.
Okay, so you also worked in DC in 2019?
Yes.
Okay, so you are our prototypical case here. So you had wages in both states. You applied for unemployment and you were a W-2 worker in both of those places?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So you applied for unemployment in DC, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and did you start receiving your benefits?
No, I was held ineligible.
Okay.
Yeah, I was held ineligible due to a situation on my claim prior that I had to eventually take to appeal. DOES told me that they mailed out things that I never received. I checked the mailbox every day.
Was this an identity issue, or did they
No,
do you mind telling us what the issue was?
I was wrongfully terminated from one of my jobs last year. Okay. And they said that the situation that happened 5 miles outside of work happened on the premises, and it didn't. So I've been having my issue with DOES since September of last year.
Okay, so they say that it wasn't a layoff. You went to OAH. Did you successfully appeal that claim, or are you still in that process?
So I successfully appealed one part of my claim because once that final order came back and, it was ruled in my favor to receive my back benefits.
Okay.
Now, all of a sudden, there's something else on my claim that now I have to appeal, and I'm waiting to be scheduled for that now, too.
Oh, this is a complicated issue. Okay. But you also have the combined wage claim. And I'm just curious, when did that come into play? Oh, we might have lost your audio. Oh, okay. We got you back. Okay. So did you apply for PUC?
They told me that I was unable to receive that.
Okay. Ms. Young, I'm going to pause you there to get to Ms. Stempo for a second. So Ms. Stempo, you are work in the restaurant industry, if I remember correctly. You applied for traditional unemployment, and it took a while for that claim to process. Was there an issue on your claim at all? Were you aware of it?
No, it was just a wait. And it was a wait, and I was expecting a little bit of a wait because of the amount of people claiming at the same time. Wasn't expecting like a 2.5 month wait.
Okay.
So
it eventually processed, and then have you exhausted your 26 weeks of benefits?
Yeah, that exhausted about 3 to 4 weeks ago.
Okay, and then did you apply for the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation?
Yeah, and then I applied for the pandemic, the PUC, and I for it, and I was kind of, like I said, waiting for some sort of like email that was going to say, okay, now that you've applied for it, keep doing this or do this or some sort of steps, which there was no information. And then I waited a couple days, still nothing. And then, tried to reach out. Eventually, after like a couple of weeks of that, I got an email reply saying that I need to file the claims on my on unemployment.
Your weekly certification?
My weekly certification, that I need to continue filing those claims. And then so I did that like immediately because I was like, oh, okay, well, it would have been nice to know that I continued to do that. I thought that I had exhausted. But so that was, and so then I went and did that, and then that they kind of gave me the back pay for that, but which was then my unemployment had been at like 270, and then after the PUC it went down $100. So
do you understand why?
No idea why, no communication or information about why that happened. It was just $300 less for the 3 weeks than it should have been. Okay. And then with my back pay that they gave me from my claim and in like March 26th to May 26th, so the 2 months, they only gave me back pay to May 6th originally. And like I was saying, right before this call, someone called me from DOES.
Okay.
And was like, it turns out, there's like 3 weeks of, which still isn't, because even from the time I claimed, it should be 5 weeks of back pay that DOES owes me. And they, sent me that like, they'll get it all filed today and out today.
I'm running out of time. I unfortunately missed myself. But I am in a problem solving mode here. So would you find it helpful if when you file for PUC, you got an email acknowledging receipt of that application and then instructions on what to do, like that you need to continue to file your weekly certification forms.
Yes, and the simpler the better. And all, like, just like keep filing your weekly, like in big bold, subject line.
Okay. Okay, that's a suggestion we'll make again. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. So we had some real life examples of some of the issues you brought up. So, but to recap, so people are running into problems with PEUC with the first extension to traditional unemployment, both because they have combined wage, they actually did earn wages in their base period, and there's confusion about what to do. And then there are people, and I certainly can attest to this from those who've written to me, there are DOES informs them that they do have wages, but they did not work in the base period during that time. These are some of the things that I do hope to talk to Director Morse Hughes about next week. Help me out with any other, so we have PEUC is a certainly a problematic area. And in terms of problem solving, it would be helpful. My understanding is people do now get an email when they're reaching their exhaustion of benefits that they need to apply for PEUC. So thank you, DOES, for doing that. But do you agree with Ms. Stumpo? It would be helpful to have acknowledgement of receipt of the PEUC claim and then instructions on what to do. Would that be helpful?
There is complete lack of guidance on the entire program, no matter what you're doing, when you are in the program or what's happening. Specifically, when you do face issues, there's really no guidance on how to interact with the unemployment departments of Maryland and Virginia. There's pretty much a attitude of go talk to them and come back to us. I had to very quickly become an unemployment expert, essentially, becoming someone who was unemployed in March. And there was no support system. There was no infographic. There was, I had to just kind of work my way through the system, look at some Facebook pages of friends of mine, seeing what they clicked and what happened and what made them ineligible or what they had issues or who had success, and kind of cross-reference everything. And there was none of that for people at the beginning of this entire crisis, and there's still nothing now. So there's very little guidance on how to do this properly, how to get everything in order, because there's quite a bit on the employer side or the employee side that you want to make sure you get all your ducks in a row and have your application ready to go, give them all the information they need and make sure it's accurate. There is some responsibility there, but there's very little guidance on how to be as proactive as possible on your end so that DOES can do their job as effectively and as quickly as possible.
I agree with you, Mr. Hoffman. As I said, we're going to have to move to the next panel soon, but I agree with you. I will put in a plug for our own website. So we have developed some materials, as you know, to help people, but we are going to develop some materials on PEUC because I will admit, even until I delved into this recently, didn't understand the complexity of, it's not simply an extension if you have wages in multiple states. It's a more complicated process that I think our claimants need help understanding. So I certainly agree with you there. I'm going to wrap up, but for one more minute, is there anything else with our hospitality workers? Any other? So we talked about sort of two big issues with the combined wages. Anything else that you can identify as a major obstacle for our hospitality workers in terms of collection of benefits?
Not a major obstacle, but one thing that I discovered, hi, this is Andrew Shapiro. One thing that I discovered that I don't think a lot of people know about, and I think this is particularly germane to part-time workers, is that, and maybe I'm incorrect in how I heard this, but if you are working and it's like week to week and some hours you have more than others, you should obviously keep filing. And if you make too much to qualify for that week, then that week goes on the back end, so you actually get that back. I don't know how that works with the extended benefits program or PUC, but I'm on extended benefits. I think, and
I do want to ask you one thing, Mr. Shapiro, before we wrap up, because you said there were 2 newsletters you found were incredibly helpful to you. What were those newsletters?
Well, one was the actual DOES newsletter,
Okay.
which I've gotten twice. The other is Vince Gray's Ward 7 newsletters are like super useful, and they come out once a week. There's like lots of information in there. But I just wanted to make sure people know, or if I'm incorrect in stating this, that if people do make too much to qualify for a week, they should still qualify, and they ostensibly will get that week added onto the back end. So if people get back out of work, they haven't actually lost a week. And I had to find that out by calling in.
Okay.
But I think at this point that would be very helpful to a lot of people, particularly those working part-time jobs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shapiro. And I want to thank all 4 of you. I wish we had more time, but we are going to have to move to our second panel. So thank you all very much for spending time with us this morning.